Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I want to start out with a intriguing question. What if you could master the art of balancing profit with peace of mind in the field of real estate, which is a rare feat? Terrie did just that, and she's coming to us from Montreal, Canada, and she has labeled herself as the Mindful Landlord. She's also a world champion in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I'm really happy to have her on to add value to the audience. So, Terrie, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me on, Chris.
Yeah, briefly introduce yourself, and I'm excited to dive into this intriguing question.
Sure. Okay, awesome. So I guess the main hat that I wear now is as an investor. And so maybe you might hear by my light Canadian accent, I'm based in Montreal, Canada. And so my portfolio really is in and around the area where I live. So up here near Montreal, we're the French speaking part of Canada. And I'm the quintessential accidental landlord. I fell into managing properties when I was 19 as a student. And I tapped my dad on the shoulder 6 years after that to say, look, I've been doing this for other people, and now maybe it's time to make an investment. So started out that way. And then, long story short, acquired a few properties and couldn't figure out how to scale. So we have lending laws here which divide the world into residential and multifamily. And I got tapped out of personal borrowing capacity and couldn't crack that equation for 10 years. And then when I started hanging around with other investors and being in a more professional environment, I learned how to scale. And the other thing that happened around the same time is I had all these ideas from my martial arts world. And I had, I guess you could call it a career as a combat athlete. And I also had some trials with anxiety personally. And the way that I was able to get out of that was by learning mindfulness. And then it's because I was running a real estate empire, if you want to put it that way, at the same time as having some of those mindfulness ideas. And it was just crazy to me as I got a little bit into the coaching space to see how much of the things that people are missing are actually not just how to do a deal, how to crunch numbers, how to do those kind of things. But a lot of it is that mental training aspect. And so that's what then motivated writing the book, Mindful Landlord, and then also getting more into doing some real estate coaching in my home market here in Montreal.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And so one thing, this is really, because I'm always interested in studying the top 0.1%. And from what I've gathered, a lot of them use mindfulness, and a lot of them use Eastern techniques, and just different modalities to enhance their performance. How do you differentiate mindfulness from mindset?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that question, because this is one of my pet peeves, which is that in the real estate industry, it's mindset all day long. And there's this slippage because some people hear mindset and then they think, oh, mindful, but it's actually really not the same thing. So mindset, I would say, is something that you do with your thinking mind. And so we're talking about 4 a.m. wake up routines and affirmations and sticky notes on the mirror, which I'll say right now, I do none of those things. And mindfulness is really understanding how your consciousness operates. And so if I want to give you just a 5-minute takeaway that you can walk away from this podcast episode and be like, okay, now I get it a little bit more. So our consciousness is actually divided into 3. And so the very top is the thinking mind, and that's the radio. So imagine that your thoughts are always running. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them bring you up, some bring you down, but you can choose to tune out of that at will, the same way you would lower the volume on the radio. You never turn the radio off because your mind, one of the things that operations it does is to think, but you don't have to identify with those thoughts. Okay, so that's the first thing, is to gain some distance from your thinking mind. The next thing is to understand the function of emotions. And I like to make 2 parallels here, one being the dashboard light. So your emotions are there to send you a message. And as dashboard lights go on, my husband's a mechanic, and sometimes he's like, Terrie, that dashboard light, you don't need to panic about that. Just keep driving. And I'm like, yeah, but when I see a dashboard light, I immediately want to pull over and panic. Your emotions are the same thing. So if you feel anger or fear, those emotions are there to keep you safe or to encourage you to react to something. Now, do you need to flip out and freak out at someone, or do you need to run screaming? It depends on whether there's a tiger chasing you or whether this is just something that's creating discomfort. And so to begin to understand your emotions as something that we don't need to suppress them. They're actually there to protect us, but we need to develop this relationship of distance to them. And that then brings us to the third level of consciousness, which is called the watcher, or this thing that gets called presence or now in Eastern thinking. And that by learning to identify increasingly with that, you're able to gain distance from the thinking mind, from the emotions, and to really come into this thing that is you, which is just your pure consciousness. And the degree to which you can identify with that is going to have all those kind of performance enhancing, let's say, byproducts and a whole bunch of other stuff. Because when you do that, your whole worldview has to get turned on its head. And so then we get into other stuff, which we can talk about if you want to go there. Some of that would be intrinsic and extrinsic validation or connectedness. And those are things that as you become more mindful, you have to see them because that goes hand in hand, but it's not specifically related to enhancing performance.
Yeah. And again, a lot to unpack there. And my follow-up question to you is, how does this look like a mindful real estate investor? Like for example, like I can see Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan or Kobe or LeBron, like they're applying these and they're in flow, they're hitting every shot, like they're seeing the matrix like Neo. How does this look like if you're applying this in real estate investing?
Oh my goodness. It's just, so you're going to get it immediately when I say it. So I think like the two things in real estate and in landlording, like in real estate, fear, because no matter where you are, whether you're just starting and you're closing on that first property or whether you're scaling from 100,000 to 1,000,000, every time you have to take one of those steps, there's fear. And if you don't develop a good relationship with that emotion and to understand when do I need to pull over the car, because like sometimes you are going to need to pull over the car. Like in real estate, like people go bankrupt, people sink themselves. And so part of what you need to do is to learn to, you can't disregard those signals, but you can't be ruled by them either. And so I think growing in any field comes with the unknown. And it's one thing to do it when, for example, in martial arts, okay, I'm trying out a new move in the gym. What's the worst is going to happen? I'm going to get punched in the face. Okay, fine. I'll shake it off and come back tomorrow. But if I lose $1 million, like that's a big deal. And so like the fear of that unknown is so big that it can stop a lot of people in their tracks. And so the first thing is to just get a handle on your emotions. And then the other thing is like interacting with other people, because if you're landlording, like real estate is a people business. And you might be able to keep your business relationships clean, but your relationship with tenants, like that is a whole can of worms. And so one of the things that motivated me to write this Mindful Landlord is it's partly a property management book, because having hand in hand with growing my portfolio, like I also own a management company and my value add is good management. And so to be able to be in that space and not get consumed by all the small irritations and the personal struggles and like all the stuff that comes along with tenants, like it's so much stuff. Like people have so much stuff, and not physical stuff, but like emotional and mental stuff. And to be able to be in that environment and deal with it and not use your humanity, but at the same time, keep your eye on profit. That is really the nut to crack if you're going to self-manage.
Yeah, it's I love how you said it. It's like property management and landlording, or you're like you're first at whatever comes your way. That's very helpful. And next question I have for you is, so with this idea of mindfulness versus mindset and what it looks like, when you step back and you take a look at things, you mentioned that you took on personal debt to grow your business, and then it reached a point where you had to learn how to scale. What were those tools and techniques that helped you to scale as a self-managed or a property manager or just somebody investing in rentals?
So I think the first thing was to like find my real estate personality. And like people talk about real estate as if it's one thing, but it's really 100, not 100. It's maybe 50 things, right? Like some people do short-term rentals, Airbnbs, some people do midterm rentals, some people do construction, some people do different kinds of like value adds. And I started early on when I couldn't scale. I founded a property management company. And so I've known for a while that like my value add is management. And like when I acquire a property, I look for things that are badly managed because I know that's where I can add my grain of salt. I'm not going to do a crazy construction project, but I am going to get a badly managed building, like a D property up to a C plus. So understanding that like part of my, what's my value add, and then to be able to really structure partnerships. And I know that between the US and Canada, things are a little bit different. I think you guys jump very quickly to syndications. For us, syndication is really, there's a whole lot of like fees and different things associated with that because we just have a lot more red tape. And so like in Canada, the way we tend to scale is in joint venture partnerships. And so to understand professionally how you set those up, how do the contracts work? How do you pitch it? Because ultimately, like what I'm doing is I'm coming in and I'm helping with someone's money. I'm helping them do a deal that they could never do. And I'm helping them manage the deal. And so to then tell them, okay, but for that, you're going to give me this much equity, or you're going to pay me out this much when I attain this objective. That's not necessarily an easy conversation to have if you're not really aligned on it. You're not very clear about what is the value that you bring. So I think those are really the two. And then obviously understanding multi-residential financing, which in Canada is a bit of a real different game for how we finance residential properties. So like those are the I guess the three moving pieces that allowed me to scale.
Yeah. An adjacent question is strategies for managing investments in a way that balances financial success with mental well-being. We all have this the story of the disaster tenant or just the disaster property. What sort of strategies have you used for managing those types of investments?
Yeah. Okay. Look, and that's basically the topic of the book, right? So I don't want to take up the next 4 hours of your podcast with it, but I'll just give your listeners maybe two takeaways that they could implement once they finish listening to the show. And one really big one for me was communication and streamlining and then sticking to how you want people to communicate with you. And if you're going to self-manage, this is extremely crucial. And at the beginning of my career, I had two phones. Like I had the phone where the tenants have this phone number, and then I had my personal phone because I don't want to be texting people about irrelevancies at 11 p.m. Like that can really ruin your life. And so whatever that looks like, whether it is that you set up a business number or you encourage people to communicate with you by email, like you need some kind of communication system to set it up and then to stick to it with diligence. Because if you start breaking your own rules, when people discover they can get access to you anytime they want, they will use and abuse it. That's one thing. And then the second thing is also making that decision of whether or not you're going to self-manage. And like property management is not for everyone. And as I build my management business, like most of my clients at the beginning were people who should never have been managing buildings. And every time they picked up the phone to their tenants, they ended up saying yes to things that they should never in a million years have said yes to. And so if you're one of those people who's maybe too kind or too agreeable or too whatever, like maybe for your business, the best thing you can do is get yourself a property manager who like has that character that they can stand up for people and fight for your interests. Because really as a property manager, that's what I do what my team does is that we stand in for your interests, right? And that is in how you recruit and manage a property manager. First of all, that's the kind of person you want. And secondly, don't just give them the keys and shut your eyes. And this is one of the things also that I get into in the book, which is how to set up that like hybrid system that allows you to insert those checks and balances that are not just giving someone the keys to your building and be like, here, take care of it. That's another leaving a door open to be abused by someone. And in business, there's not only nice people out there, and property managers, if you give them too much power, they already have a lot of power. And if you give them too much power by shutting your eyes and not communicating with your tenants or not visiting the property, like that's a real recipe to get taken advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah. Which brings me to you hinted at it, this self-management versus outsourcing. The other question is, there's a lot of talk here that the younger generation is priced out of real estate and they're looking to other things. How do you do you still think that real estate is still the best investment class, or is there alternatives or diversification? Because I know you invest internationally as well. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question because I think for this younger generation coming up, I do think that they're facing a different set of problems in some ways than I was when I was 25 years old and making my first investment, right? Like the price tag has gone up. The level of competition has gone up because I know that when I was buying that first property, like everybody was like, what, you want to invest in real estate? Who are landlords? They're like old men with like rough hands. And what are you doing getting into this? Like my first property was 20 years ago. So like the market was not what it is today. But I do think that sadly, our society is on its way to being this like two-tier system, right? There's the people who own property and own assets that appreciate with time, and there's people who work for a paycheck. And looking into the future, especially with the baby boomer wealth transition happening, and there's a lot of, they say 80% of North America's wealth is tied up in 20% of the boomers. And so that means that 20% of our generation is going to inherit that money. But then what about everybody else? And I think if you're sitting there and you don't have an inheritance coming down the pipeline, your question should be like, how can I get a piece of real estate? And maybe you buy with someone else, or maybe you're buying in a secondary market. And a lot of the young people that I'm coaching now are coming to me and I'm saying like, look, you need to just, doesn't matter if you live in it. If you're buying a condo in a secondary market 2 hours out of town, just do it. And 5 years from now, when it comes time to buy your home, you will thank me because that the tide has lifted that boat. And so rather get something in there and have the tide pull it up with you, because otherwise in 5 or 10 years time, that jump is going to be so much bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. They say the best time for real estate was yesterday. The next best time is today.
Now.
Yeah. And like I've talked to so many people, just wealthy, rich, they've always invested in real estate as an asset class, and it's where they kind of park their money. We have a few more minutes remaining. And so talk about from combat sports and business resilience, and how is your experience as a 3-time Brazilian Jiu Jitsu world champion influence your mindset and approach to real estate investing?
Yeah, for sure. I think that what combat sports has taught me so much, and part of it is that mindfulness thing, like managing fear. There's no short of, I want to say, going to actual war. Like when you're getting into a ring and there's a risk that someone's going to knock you out, you have to have pretty good control of yourself to be able to perform, because it's not just like I have to stay there. No, I have to be at my best in that situation. Definitely like managing fear, but then there's also the discipline aspect. And I think for those of you who watch UFC or like you watch boxing, like you're watching the 15-minute highlight of that person like getting into that fighting environment. But what you don't see is the weight cutting and the constant dieting and the hours in the sauna that they had to do to dehydrate themselves 24 hours before. And then the hours in the gym that got put in. And when the gym's not enough, all the running on the road and getting up at 4 and putting on the shoes, even though it's snowing outside. And so like, I don't want to end up sounding rocky or like my grandma. I used to walk 5 miles to school. It's not that to say, but it's just that, that I guess level of discipline. And again, for your listeners, like maybe not everybody who's listening to the show is going to be like, oh, I'm going to go and sign up for my local jiu-jitsu school and then compete. But it's that the extent to which you can do those things that teach you that discipline. And it's that discipline to wake up every day. And it doesn't matter what you feel like. If you have a goal, put in the time. And you're in a good mood, you're in a bad mood, you're sad, you're doubting, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Put your shoes on, go run. Or do whatever it is that you need to do. And those little incremental things stack up over time. And it took me 10 years. Like it actually took me 20 years, because I had first a 10-year stint in kickboxing. I wanted to be a world champion kickboxer, never happened. Then I retired from kickboxing, went into jiu-jitsu, another 10 years. And it took me, end to end, it took me 20 years. And at the end, like after I won, I was like sitting around having a conversation. I'm like, you know what? All I did was show up. That's all I did was show up. And if I quit at 19 years, I would never have had the medal to now be able to say, okay, 3-time world champion. It would have been no time world champion. So put in the work and keep showing up.
And it's amazing because most people, there's this great quote, I think it's by Napoleon Hill, but most people stop 3 feet short of their goal. Like they're so close, but then they just stop. And most like investors, successful entrepreneurs, they've always had some sort of physical activity. It could be jujitsu or running or just something just like to keep themselves in peak performance, mental and physical, so and spiritual too. How can people find you and learn more about you? And I love your passion and your work and your drive.
Thank you. Look, so my book, Mindful Landlord, is available on Amazon. And then for people who want to learn more about mindfulness, I have a free giveaway on my website, Terrie Schauer /escape. And that's a 30-day mindfulness challenge that if you're looking to develop this muscle of yours, you want to learn a little bit more about it. It's just like a fun 30-day thing that is not going to take you more than, shouldn't take you more. The most it will take you is an hour a day. But go ahead and sign up for that. And then you can walk away from that in 30 days and be like, okay, they've not mastered mindfulness. I've at least given myself a kickstart into it. And I want those ideas to be out there so much that while there's other aspects of my coaching that I get people pay for, that 30-day challenge and the book also, which is $19, like it's a pretty low ticket item. I would do that for free because the extent to which those ideas get out there, I think a lot of people can profit from them. And I think it's not just like life changing. I think it's actually world changing, because I think when you begin to make those changes in yourself, your family benefits, your business relation, like everything around you will change as a result of it.
Yeah, so powerful. I really love that. And thanks so much for coming on, and keep up the great work. And kudos to all of your investment success.
Thanks so much for having me on.